Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second annual RECA Mortgage Broker Industry Council Spring Engagement Session. We had our first session with the Industry Council last spring, and we're going to have this as an annual tradition moving forward. It's an opportunity to hear from your standard setting and governing body for your industry sector and to ask them questions and really let them know what you're seeing out there on the ground day to day. Firstly, I'll introduce myself. My name is Brian Dewey. I'm the Communications and Connections Manager here at RECA. I'll be the moderator for this engagement session. But before I pass things off to the Industry Council Chair, I just want to briefly cover how the session will unfold. First, the Chair will go through a brief presentation outlining the Industry Council's activities and priorities going forward, followed by an open question and answer session. If you have a question for the Industry Council, you can ask it at any time during the presentation or after using the Q&A window. You'll see the button to open the window at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you have Zoom in full screen mode, you'll see it at the top when you move your cursor to the top of your screen. When the presentation has concluded, I will ask the Industry Council Chair your questions. Please note, this is a curated Q&A session. If you have a question that falls under the jurisdiction of another industry council or the board, please save that question for their online engagement sessions. Or you can send your question to those bodies at their particular email address, which you can find on RECA's website. And please note, I may not read your question word for word. If there's more than one question relating to a particular topic, I will ask the question related to a theme based on those questions. And if your question contains unprofessional language or contains defamatory language or misinformation, please note that I will not read that question. But now that housekeeping is out of the way, and without further ado, I will pass things off to Clarence Lee. He is the chair of the Mortgage Broker Industry Council. Welcome, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Brian. And thank you all for logging in and taking in on this session. I know we're probably all had it up to our eyeballs with Zoom meetings and what have you, but it seemed we agreed that this would be the most efficient way to reach as many people with as minimum logistical problems. You know, do we have one in Edmonton? Do we have one in Calgary? And so on and so forth. So I'd like to introduce the members of our Mortgage Industry Council. The first two fellows, Guy Ouellette and Nikim Amibullah, are both members of the public that sit on our board. And Guy is he's quasi-retired, but he's a business person and certainly understands the flow of business and has been very instrumental in some of the practicality and what it takes to, are we going to introduce this way of looking at things or maybe another way? And he's been very, very helpful on it. And I'd like to maybe give Guy a few minutes just to maybe talk a little bit about yourself, Guy, if you don't mind. I hate to put you on the spot, but the floor is yours, sir.
Well, if you keep puffing me up, I'll never hang up. I'm going to feel pretty good at the end of the day. So, hello, everyone. My history or background, I guess, is more in the oil and gas project management side of the world. We do have a mid-sized home construction company and run a beef cattle operation as well. So we've got our hands in a few things. But super enjoying working with the rest of the board and trying to get this place, the whole province, the whole RECA world into a place that it's a functioning, well-oiled machine. And I think we're well on our way to that. So that's a little bit of my background. It's interesting to have a viewpoint that's outside of maybe the mortgage industry to see if we can set things up from maybe, I guess the public's perspective. It's how I view it and how it can best serve everyone involved. So that's probably it. I'll let you continue on.
Thank you, Guy. And our other public member is Nikim Amibullah. Now, Nikim is an independent consultant and principal with Canyon Incorporated. Prior to becoming an independent consultant, he worked for Deloitte as a manager of human capital division. He is currently studying for his doctorate in business administration, and he's married. He lives in Edmonton with his wife and his 3 kids. And Kim, if you'd like to maybe say a few things about yourself and whatever.
Thanks a lot, Clarence, and morning, everyone. Glad to be here. Just like Clarence had mentioned, I'm a business management consultant operating my own shop here in Edmonton called Syncon Incorporated. Prior to that, worked with Deloitte and Touche as a manager. My previous background is also in the oil and gas. I'm a geophysicist. Prior to moving into the management side of businesses or business operations. I think just like Guy had mentioned, glad to be part of this board, glad to look at things from the lens of the public view. And I'm here to, make a difference and push the industry council, mortgage industry council forward. Obviously with the help of stakeholders like all of you and my fellow board members. So I appreciate to be here.
Thank you, Nakim. Now, one of our members of the board who is not here, Gord Appel, and to the mortgage practitioners, most of us anyway, are familiar with Gord. Gord is a past president of the Alberta Mortgage Brokers Association, and he's one of the principals at Axiom Mortgages. And he has been a practicing mortgage practitioner for many, many years, at least 15 years. And he's got a lot of passion. And unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, and he'd let me know ahead of time. I believe he's out of the country. Terrible me, I didn't ask where, but he's just not. He might try to get on, but being away, he may not have the access, the internet access. And of course, the 4th person on our board is Paul Bojakli, who is our vice chair of the Mortgage Industry Council. And as the vice chair, Paul sits on the RECA board. He is our mortgage rep on that board. And Paul, if you'd like to maybe just say 1 or 2 words about yourself, saves me rattling on there. So go ahead, Paul.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Sorry, just getting adjusted. Hope everyone's having a good day. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Clarence and the board, and Brian for doing this. I'm Paul. I'm with Qantas Mortgage Solutions, and I'm fortunate enough to have been nominated to the Industry Council, and I'm looking forward to today. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have lots of questions for us too. So lots has happened here in the last little bit.
Thanks, Paul. And folks, just so you know, I just put Paul on the spot. I didn't let him know that I was going to ask him to do that. And he's far too modest, okay? He's a very passionate practitioner. Him and I have had some really excellent conversations over the last 18 months. He's definitely dialed in terms of all things good in the industry. And he's a real gentleman and a pleasure to have on the council. And he serves us well on the board. Now there's a couple of other gentlemen that I want to introduce. Brian Dewey, who is our communications guru expert, he helps us out with all things in terms of communication, and he's very instrumental. And Brian, we certainly appreciate your efforts and what you do to make us look far better than what we really are. And I think that should be mentioned to our stakeholders. And the other 2 gentlemen probably don't really need an introduction. Gary Siegel, who is also a past president of the Alberta Mortgage Brokers Association. He sits he doesn't sit on the board, but he works for RECA, and he's kind of like maybe an ombudsman or a person that if you are a practitioner and you have questions and you're not too sure, perhaps what the answers are or where to go to find them, Gary is the guy to communicate with, and he's been very helpful personally to myself. He too is very, very, very passionate about our industry, and him and I have had some very, very terrific conversations with regard to the industry and whatnot, and definitely a very valued person in our industry. So whenever you're at a conference and you see Gary, go up to him, shake his hand, introduce yourself if you don't know him, and you might want to say thank you for what he does. And the next fellow, Mr. Charles Stevenson, he is our registrar of the Real Estate Council of Alberta. And Charles pretty much, there's very little about the industry, about policy, about regulation that Charles doesn't know. And if on the off chance that, I have a question for Charles that he doesn't know, and he says, geez, I don't know the answer to that, I'll get back to you. I mean, I write that down and and the date and the time and the whole bit. But Charles has been very intricate, especially for me as the chairperson, in terms of moving forward, his thoughts and considerations on some of the ideas and notions. So these two fellows are very, very instrumental, Gary and Charles. And so I wanted to point that out. Now, we've got our communications people, and of course, Christina, who is keeping us, probably telling us what we're taking too long talking and we better move on with everything. So without that prompting, we'll move forward to the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the education, divestment, and relicensing considerations. We're going to chat a little bit about RECA, strategic planning, and the Mortgage Broker Industry Council, and of course the Industry Council activity and upcoming priorities. Towards the end, as Brian mentioned, we'll have questions that you can jot down, and Brian will read them out. So, the main thing we want to say to our stakeholders is that the council is here. We want to hear from you. Okay. The number one goal for RECA in general is to protect the public's interest, to make sure that business is conducted in such a way that consumers are looked after, number one priority. So, public protection in terms of how we conduct our business and how we do our business is paramount. But notwithstanding that, there's always the devil in the details, policies, procedures, thought processes. And, there's 5 of us here. We've got the entire staff at RECA, but then there's the stakeholders themselves, right? And the part we want to emphasize to stakeholders is we want to know what you think. Where are the positives? Where are the negatives? Okay, we don't really want to hear too much about the negative, just more the positive. No, I'm kidding. But we want to make sure that the rules and the communication is fair and equitable for both the public, but also the practitioner. So that for us is very, very important. And if I could just mention to you with regard to education divestment, and then I'm going to ask Paul to maybe take it away, is that all divestment will occur by June 1st of 2022. Several course providers like AMBA universities have been approached, and of course the relicensing education options. So Paul, if you've got anything to add, please take it away and let us know.
What I'd really like to say about that is there's a lot of work that went in behind the scenes with that, and I'd like to commend Joseph Fernandez and his whole team for what they've done and how well they've done it. And this was a huge undertaking to get it out there, and I think it's important that our industry know that we, as an industry council, approved the competencies, and we were behind everything that was done there from a review perspective. But Joseph and his team did a great job putting it all together. And like I said, there was a lot of pressure to get it out by June 1st here. So the good news is that it's out there. We have some excellent course providers, AMBA being one of them. And yeah, that was the most important thing, I think, from something that I'd like to say from our industry council.
And unfortunately for us, Joseph Fernandez has retired. He's he's retired, but he's still around. I've still got his telephone number. I think we all do on the council and at RECA. And we definitely do owe Joseph a debt of gratitude for his many years of service and work on the council. And education, knowledge is power, and we definitely want to have the best that there possibly could be out there for incoming learners to our industry. You can never know too much. And so from that standpoint, yes. And the reason why I asked Paul, of course, because Paul sat in those meetings, when we talked about competencies, we definitely thoroughly went through, all of them, almost line by line. The conversation was passionate for sure. The points of view were tremendous. And then that was just, between the five of us, and then of course the education committee went through it too. Now, I think the thing to keep in mind is that because we're small and we're very tight, but we're very nimble. So if things require adjustment, that's entirely possible. Okay. And so we're very mindful, and this again is why, we need to know from industry, what's working, what's not working. And so it's very important to say, tell us what your thoughts are, so that we'll take it under advisement. Obviously, we're not going to just go along with every suggestion. That's not how it works. But we certainly need to know if we're hitting the mark and if we're not. And so from this is a big shift for all of us in the divestment of the education, and it has been a monumentally heavy lifting task for all persons involved in making this happen for June 1st. So thank you for that, Paul. And moving right along to, the board is responsible for RECA's strategic direction. But in that, the mortgage broker industry council is consulted very heavily. And so it's kind of, it's a very in-depth, high-level, deep down, far-reaching conversation on pretty much all topics as it pertains to what's next for the industry. And so this is where it's great for the five of us to come up with these wonderful notions or ideas, but it's also very, very critical that all stakeholders provide initial feedback in the process. Now, we have had initial feedback in late last year in 2021. And like I say, the strategic priorities are in consultation are on now, the deadline being June 9th. Again, one of the reasons why we wanted to reach out to industry to say, look, if you haven't already, definitely reach out to us and give us your feedback. It's very, very important. Self-regulation is something that is, we're the only province, as far as I know, our jurisdiction that has self-regulation. And because of that, we are able to not necessarily move the needle like that, but we're very able to, if things don't seem to be working out for whatever reason, we can make shifts. Now, I'm not saying again, someone will send in a really great idea, and then a month later we'll change things. But this is something that not other provinces have. It's pretty much, here's how it's going to be. here's how you're going to implement it. And, we might want to know a little bit what you think, but we're really going to just move ahead and go in this direction. Here in Alberta, with this council and the three other councils and industry, we collectively talk about it, decide what's best. May not going to please everybody, but it's going to be the best possible solution to whatever sits in front of us. And that's one of the main reasons why, back in the day, I decided to put my name forward and say, yeah, you know what, I think I want to be a part of this. And so if you're thinking that you've got something that you want to provide, our deadline is June the 9th. So it's something to consider, especially all of you mortgage brokers, people who are running your own shop. You've definitely got a vested interest. You've got people counting on you. And so it's important that if there are things there that you think are important, definitely let us know. So the RECA strategic priorities, if you can just flip to the next screen there, Brian, are based on, regulatory excellence, trust and confidence, and organizational resilience. Now I could read through the whole thing, but I think it is pretty straightforward. Our number one priority always is consumer protection. Okay. And then we're going to want to review the rules as they sit today and make sure that they are current with the current Real Estate Act. And we're either going to tweak or delete or maybe even add certain rules. It is a process that we are undertaking, and it's again, it's not an easy task to be taken, and it's not one that we will not do without consultation from stakeholders. So there was another point that just came into my head and it kind of flew right out. It'll come to me, I'm sure. It's important that we're all busy and we all have, as a mortgage practitioner, we're worried about the deal that's on our desk and moving it across the finish line or getting the proper information from the consumer, or maybe trying to track down where that next deal is coming from, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of parts to the industry. And because of that, we all get very, very busy. And we think about stuff, but we should do this, we should do that, but don't really quite get around to doing it. And it's important because, again, I can't stress to you enough that self-regulation is not a luxury, but it's not a given. Okay, self-regulation is something that we always have to be very mindful of, and we always have to be working towards making it better. And so, because of that, notwithstanding the fact that we're all very busy and doing our thing, okay, it's important to pay attention to what's happening, at the regulatory level. We're so consumed on, interest rates, consumer, the economy, the whole 9 yards. But as a mortgage broker, it's just one of the many things that we need to be very mindful of. So that is important, guys. So consult with the board on industry council, election bylaws, election eligibility, education, divestment, disciplinary action. I'm happy to say that in the mortgage space, I mean, we're not perfect, and we do have our issues when it comes to disciplinary activity. There's no question. Okay. But on the grand scheme of things, and collectively or comparatively to, say, other jurisdictions in the mortgage space here in Alberta, it is relatively low. There was a chart that Charles sent me. And I was going to ask Brian to make it part of the PowerPoint, but I didn't want to, it just, there's a lot of stuff here and I just didn't want to overload everybody. But, at the end of the day, or, in relationship to all complaints that come across the desk at RECA, less than 9% in the mortgage space actually go right through to some kind of either a sanction or a letter of reprimand and so on and so forth. Now, it should be 0%, but I guess that we can always shoot for a perfect score, but that may never really happen. But the thing is that when a complaint is made, I can assure you that the investigation group at RECA do a very, very, very thorough investigation, and in a lot of cases, it doesn't meet the level of bringing it any further for whatever reason. Maybe sometimes the two parties were able to sort it out on their own, and so the complaint doesn't go any further. But every complaint is taken seriously, and every complaint is investigated to a level of where if additional actions need to be taken, then they are. And it can go as far as a review panel if the infraction is goes further on. So our disciplinary process, in order to guard ourselves in the industry, is pretty good, in my opinion. Now, I might be biased because I'm I sit on the council where I do, and I see what's out there, but it is something to say when I look at what happens in other jurisdictions. And again, I'm not saying that Alberta is completely free of any type of wrongdoing, because that's not the case. But it's not as pervasive here in Alberta as it is in other jurisdictions. So. And there are advertising changes proposed in previous years, but not have been revised. And so we're not there yet. So there was a lot of discussion before changes were made, and so it is one of the things that the industry councils are going to want to get sorted out. And of course, the proposed rule changes. We definitely want to not overhaul, but take a deep dive look at private lending. It's been our experience that most of the situations where expectations aren't met, or issues with the lending, has been in the private sector. Okay, most of the no insurance claims are because of the private lending. So we want to take a good hard look at that, and just see where we can enhance perhaps maybe best practice, provide additional education to the industry in terms of private lending. We think that is something that definitely needs to be done. It has commenced, but we haven't necessarily gotten into the weeds or the deep part of the pool yet with regard to the private lending space. But I can assure you that is one of the things that we want to cover off. So, our next slide, please. Just to recap there, the ongoing stakeholder engagement. We have talked at great lengths, as a regulator, how can we reach out to the stakeholder? How can we get participation or engagement? Because it is very, very important. And again, I'm not too sure what the right answer is. I mean, obviously, we're having this Zoom session today. Hopefully, this will be helpful, but it's an ongoing thing. And so we've looked at onboarding a communications director. That hasn't been quite done yet, but to take a deep dive and a look at just how can we get our message out to the public, but also to the stakeholder. Here's what we're doing. What do you think? Here are the rules. Are they practical? Are you able to adhere to them? The licensing framework, the relicensing education, the whole 9 yards. And so consultation is definitely is one of the things I think the KPMG report came out to say, RECA probably didn't do a great job. I'm not here to debate whether they did or whether they didn't. The point is that, what we want to do is to make sure that we're accessible and that, we're here to listen because we want to know what your thoughts are. And so the final part is the Q&A. So if I can just have, I guess, Brian, if you've got questions there. And now I've asked Charles and Gary and Paul and Dee and Kim. So, because there may be questions that are going to be asked that I'm just not going to know. So I'm going to hopefully you guys can help me out on this. So let her go there, Brian.
I am. Yes, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have one question so far. Perhaps Paul, as the member of the board, may be best to answer it, but will RECA be having a serious look at having home builders be governed by RECA as well? This is a major issue as far as protection for the public.
Thank you, Brian. Hey, thanks, Sean. That's a really good question. I know we had talked about that at the advisory committee meeting at one point, and unfortunately, right now, it's not within RECA's jurisdiction to be able to manage that. But I know it's in the radar, and I know it's from an industry perspective, it is one of our goals. To try and work with them. So I think right now that's the best we could do with it.
Great. Thank you. Any more questions? Anyone has anything or comments about anything? We have one comment from Lauren that says, in relation to your talk about RECA's complaint rate, Clarence, and says, I don't think the goal of consumer complaints can ever be zero, but most corporations try to hit 95% customer satisfaction. So perhaps a 5% complaint rate is a good goal.
And that's I guess it's a good comment, but it's not anything really that we can control, right? Because we measure all complaints. Okay, so all complaints get taken very, very seriously. They are investigated when necessary, and they are thoroughly investigated. They're not just, they're just thoroughly investigated. So we track that, and I don't know, Charles, if you're still there, you can maybe can add to that a little bit more eloquently than what I'm doing right now. But it's funny when we start talking about misgivings or complaints or sanctions, or everybody's ears perk up and the interest level sort of goes up a little bit. Charles, if you've got some input, we muchly appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I actually do have a couple of comments that I'd make to sort of support what it is that you're saying, and I'd begin with a premise that the basket is full mostly of good apples. We don't measure complaints against transactions, although perhaps at some point that would be a good metric. But what we do measure is that for the Real Estate Council of Alberta, the mortgage broker industry represents roughly 15% of our licensees, and our complaint inventory is about 8.2%. For the mortgage sector as a percentage of the whole. So again, A, the basket is full mostly of good apples, and B, from an industry perspective, you guys are punching below your weight, which I think is a really positive indicator. So thanks for that, Mr. Chair. Those are the 2 points I'd make.
I was going to say something like that, Charles, but I knew you could say it a lot better than me. So, do we have any other questions?
We have another one that came in. So it has to do with complaints of industry members complaining against other industry members. They say right now, if a realtor files a complaint on, say, a mortgage broker, the other industry member doesn't have the name disclosed. I don't think that's true. In all of our formal complaints, names are attached. It's all public, as far as I understand it. That's true, right, Charles?
Yes, I believe that is true.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, we need to distinguish between the different things that we receive. So a formal complaint is very specifically identified in Section 37 of the Real Estate Act, and that is it has to be in writing, it has to be to the registrar, has to contain reasonable particulars, and it has to contain the names of all of the parties involved, the subject, the complainant, and if applicable, a broker. So at the end of the day, that's what a complaint looks like. But we also have to act, again, in accordance with Section 38 of the Act. We have to act on information received. And information received is often provided on an anonymous basis. And in those circumstances, we do our best not to reveal the name of the complainant. It was made in an anonymous fashion. We try to honor that.
Great. We have another question about advertising. So maybe go into the rules review a bit more, Clarence. Perhaps they missed that section where will we at some point have the opportunity to have conversations surrounding the advertising guidelines? In my discussions with many brokers, there's a growing sentiment that the rules may require some updates. A lot of the rules were based when brokers and brokerages were run in a completely different manner, and times have changed and types of advertising have changed. So will there be the opportunity to have discussions around the advertising guidelines?
In a word, yes. And these are some of the areas where we do understand that some changes, or at least a minimum a review of the rules, need to be looked at very comprehensively. The advertising rules, definitely. And yes, they will definitely be reviewed, tweaked, enhanced. And we will also go to the stakeholders to say, okay, what do you think? What are your comments? What are your greatest concerns? So yes, they're definitely the advertising policy procedure guidelines are definitely going to be looked at for sure.
Yeah, and that consultation will be happening within the next several months to a year. It'll be a long consultation.
Yes. Well, because it's so when you bring up the topic of the advertising and whatnot, it is very, people get animated, they get very passionate about it, so definitely it's a telltale sign for us that, yeah, we need to look at that and see where we can enhance it and improve.
Absolutely. So education divestment question. So there are currently people teaching RECA courses. Are those people given an opportunity to teach under the new model, basically? Like, what's going to happen to them? Are they just going to lose their training?
That's a good question, Paul. I don't know if you know the answer to that. I would assume that if they are teaching right now, they understand what RECA is going through or has been going through over these last several months. And so that they've taken steps to get qualified in order to continue teaching. But you know what, guys, Paul, you may have a bit more to add to that.
I think that will be, if they meet the criteria the approved course providers. Just like you said, Clarence, I think that that's up to the providers. So that's a good question.
Okay. Another question is, will there be subcommittees established to deal with specific areas of concern?
That's a possibility. I mean, I would like to just in the mortgage or the private lending space. My desire to do the deep dive and come up with the best practice and the teaching opportunity in the private mortgage space. I have reached out to some of the mortgage brokers and associates that I know in the province, and I've had a conversation with them. And so, to develop a committee that for the private lending space is a great idea. And I've talked to Gary Siegel at length, and we've traded some information in that respect. So yes, the answer to that question would be definitely yes. That we will be reaching out to stakeholders, practitioners, to see if they're willing to, sit on a committee or do a little of the heavy lifting in order to become some kind of a policy or a procedure. That's a good question. And I'm hoping that everybody's on here, if they get a call from myself or Bojackly or RECA saying, do you want to sit on one of these committees, that you guys say, yes, absolutely, no question, no hesitation, because it's always difficult to get, people, not difficult, but it is a bit of a grind to get people to want to commit for a period of time to sit on these committees. Volunteering is a special thing, okay? Making your workplace or your industry, or it doesn't even have to be the mortgage industry, it could be almost anything, getting involved is a good thing. But, not everybody, it's not for everybody, I guess. So anyway, I digress.
Somewhat related question has to do with how to engage with the industry council and be proactively involved. After you've answered, I can probably elaborate as well. So how's the communication process work for industry in order to be engaged and be proactively involved with the industry council?
Well, I can speak for myself as being the chairman. Okay, I am on the phone on a fairly regular basis to all kinds of people, okay, in our industry. And, there are days when I'll just pick up the phone to people I don't even know, introduce myself, and just ask them how things are going. There are a number of email blasts by RECA, which goes out to all of the stakeholders to let them know what is happening. It is difficult to, you can't reach everybody, I suppose, right? And so it's a good question, but it's a difficult one. There's about 2,400 licensed practitioners in Alberta. I can't say to you that I've spoken personally to all 2,400, but I sure try to make sure that I reach out to as many as I can. But it's it's difficult. Our names and our numbers, there is a RECA website or a RECA email address. Brian, you might want to give it, that if you've got questions, with regard to the state of affairs of RECA, you can send an email to that. Gary Siegel is also a pretty good vessel if you're wondering, how to manage a certain situation. Gary is pretty accessible. And so, again, just getting back to the whole, here's the thing that won't happen, pardon me, in another jurisdiction, okay? You wouldn't have a Gary Siegel, okay? You may not even have one of these Zoom meetings. And don't quote me on that, maybe they do. And you wouldn't have an email address that you could, send in your questions or your concerns. And here's the thing, you get a call back, you get a response. you're going to get someone who's going to get back to you in a timely fashion. And that doesn't always necessarily happen in other places. And the big reason for that is because we've got these layers. We've got the Alberta Mortgage Brokers Association, we've got Mortgage Professionals Canada, we've got RECA, and we've got our little industry council as well. And so there's a lot of places for a practitioner, if they have a concern, to reach out. And you know, there's between myself, Paul, and Gord Powell, I mean, we know, you know, a fair swack of practitioners. And, you know, I think it's fair to say that if you know any of us three and you've got, you know, a concern, to pick the phone up. You know, I get calls all the time, and we chat about all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, open communication is always difficult. You know, we go round and around. What's the best way to reach as many people? And it's, you know, I guess if you're ticking along and doing your deals and life is good and there are no problems, then, you know, you may not be as engaged. I don't know. Than say if you're running into roadblocks and have issues. So.
Great. Yeah. And for that email address for the industry council, it is mortgageic@reca.ab.ca. The question asker has clarified, how do we connect with the council members? Contact info, and that's it. They will see every email that goes into that email address. So if you want to contact the industry council, that's your spot. Or attending meetings like this, if we have them in person, and providing input on consultations, because they'll see every bit of feedback in the consultations as well. And I think that one of the more important things in terms of engagement with the industry council is, and I don't have to convince this group, because obviously you all read the emails, otherwise you wouldn't have gotten the invite to join us here. But the most important thing is to read every email that comes from RECA. Only about half of our licensees even open the emails that we send out. So if you have colleagues in your brokerage, or if you come across anyone, just please encourage them to also just check out those emails, because we do provide you with plenty of opportunities to provide your feedback and engage, but you won't know about them if you don't open those emails. And so that would be the primary way we communicate, and have everything, of course, up to date on our website, particularly consultations. So if you want to provide feedback on our strategic priorities that we talked about briefly in this presentation, that consultation is the one that ends on June 9th. You can just go to our website. You'll see the link right there to go to it. And it's just a 20-minute survey. Write a novel if you want to. And the industry council would see all the mortgage responses to that one, and the board would see all the responses. But when we get into the rules review and things like how the licensing framework will work, those other things that were part of the regulatory excellence priority, you know, that'll be your time to shine with this industry council, because they'll be the ones consulting, and they'll want to hear everything and anything any ideas that you have, and they'll see it all. Okay. One more question here. It looks very industry oriented, so hopefully you can answer it. Could someone explain why the APR results are different between the Alberta disclosure versus Ontario and BC, which are the same? I don't even know what those are. Do you guys have an answer to that?
Well, yeah, you know, there was some conversation about that a couple of days ago, and someone called me and asked me, how come the APRs are different? And it depends on what you're using. And this is your cost of credit disclosure, okay? And so I'm assuming, and I could be wrong here, but the question is being asked because they're perhaps maybe doing a file where it's a private deal, and there's fees involved, and there's lawyer fees, and so on and so forth. And you have to display the APR, cost of borrowing, it's middle of the page, the effective rate, okay, versus compounding monthly, compounding semi-monthly. I don't have the document in front of me, and I don't know the verbatim wording. And so you've got, there is a Form 2 that is on the Philogic system. I can't speak to the other systems because I'm not on them, but I'm on Philogics. I don't use that particular one. About 15 years ago, maybe more, there was a gentleman by the name of Brian Menges. Some of you may know him. Brian Menges is a mortgage practitioner, owns a firm up in Edmonton. Anyway, he developed a Form 2 that you can download, and you can input your information, and it'll spit out an APR. I don't know if many of the newer practitioners use it. I still use it on my private deals, and the APR has to be within 1/8 of a percent. Okay, so if you're off by a bit because maybe you're using a template out of Ontario and it's not quite 100%, then if it's really out of whack, then yeah, something's wrong. But if it's close enough, then no, it's not. And what it calculates would be, the brokerage fee. If the lender is saying, we want an appraisal and we want you to do it by this particular firm, then that appraisal fee. And if the private lender wants you, is going to have a certain law firm draw up the documents to send to their lawyer, then the borrower is responsible for the lender's legal fees. So whatever that number might be, and all of these numbers are factored in to the cost of borrowing or the APR. And so that's a long-winded answer. I don't know if I actually gave the person the answer they were looking for, but if they wanted to, they could call me offline after this and we could discuss it in greater detail and go from there. Now, Gary, I saw you just pop up. Did you want to say something?
If you don't mind, I'd
not
just
at
like
all,
to add.
Gary.
So the formulas for calculating APR are established under typically, it used to be the Fair Trading Act here in Alberta. It's now called the Consumer Protection Act. Every province has a Consumer Protection Act, and that's where the formulas are established. So it's just some mathematical differences. I noticed that we have another comment from a noob here that basically indicates that one's a present value formula, there's just a straight math formula. So various governments across the country have decided on different ways to do the calculation. And you're right, Brian, on behalf of AMBA, I think at the time, developed that form. And that form is actually the one that's on Philogics. I mean, way back when, this goes back to when I was president, Clarence, we actually made an arrangement with Philogics to let them use the AMBA form in their system. So it's just embedded in legislation, really.
And if you use that form, you should not have a concern. The APR is going to be what the APR is, and you can pretty much, unless of course you've inputted the information incorrectly, and then of course, you may have issues. But done correctly, if you use that document, you should be okay in Alberta.
Great. Someone has clarified that the article you were talking about is by Brian Menges and Paul Karen.
Oh, well. And here, all these years I've been giving Menges the credit.
Another question is about reciprocal licensing. Do we still have reciprocal licensing with BC and other provinces, and what is involved in that process?
Okay, well, to be quite honest with you, Brian, that is an excellent question. And truthfully, I do not know the answer. I don't know that one, but I think Charles does. So go ahead, Charles.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The short answer is yes. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement in Section 7 provides for different provinces recognizing the occupational standards of other provinces, and we term that labor mobility, so that Canadians can travel freely between and among the various jurisdictions and have their credentials recognized. So the short answer is yes. And how do you approach that? Is that you would reach out to the jurisdiction in which you wish to be licensed and ask them for their forms. If you're reaching out to Alberta from outside of this province, then we have a standard form that we send. We ask for a license and discipline history, among other things, but we trade off licenses one-to-one mostly across all jurisdictions.
Great.
Good answer, Charles. And it's been my experience. I don't do a lot of stuff out of province because, well, I live here. But from time to time, I do have friends back in Ontario. My son is a licensed real estate agent on Vancouver Island. And so from time to time, very rarely actually, will I do a mortgage out of province. And it depends, because sometimes I've come up but talked to lenders that had an issue, the fact that I wasn't licensed in that province. And so what I did is I just went to another lender who really didn't care, and it just depended on the lender. And then of course Charles's answer seems to be pretty reasonable too. But like I say, I don't advertise out of province. It's a very rare occasion that I would do anything like say in Ontario or BC for that matter. But from time to time it comes up, and I'll either do it, or what I will sometimes do if it seems like it might be a little bit, a lot of work or whatever, I'll co-broke it. I'll send it out to a colleague in that province and say, take this and run with it, and away you go. So, but at the end of the day, I don't know if lenders are overly concerned, but from time to time, some of them are. So, hit and miss.
Absolutely. And we've with the market the way it is, especially on the real estate side, we've been seeing a lot of people from Ontario in particular doing activity in Alberta. And I'm sure that's a bit on the mortgage side as well. As people are priced out of the Toronto area, and people can work remotely, they suddenly want to come to a much cheaper Alberta. So be on the lookout for that. If you come across someone dealing in mortgages in Alberta without a license, kindly remind them that that is a requirement. That would be great. Another question is, if you live and work in BC, but you still have your license in Alberta, can you stay active and do both provinces? And the answer is yes, you can be licensed in all the provinces if you want to. I think we're up. We're almost at 11 here, and there's no more questions coming in. So I don't know if you want to close things out, Clarence.
Well, again, folks, I really appreciate those of you who have logged on to this session. I want to again a big thanks to Brian, to Gary Siegel, and to Charles, and of course the guys on the council, Nikim and Guy. Your input is very invaluable. We appreciate it very, very much. And Paul, never stop being that intense. I love that stuff. It's a great industry that we have. Self-regulation is something we should cherish for sure. And each and every one of us can do our little part to ensure that it is the best possible industry that it can be. So on that note, God bless you all. And that's it.